Welcome to San Antonio High School's Wood Technologies Lab, and today we're going to be preparing our veneer laminates. Behind me is our tool crib, and the tool crib you'll find layout tools, shaping and cutting tools, hand tools on the left, and then on the right, tooling for our equipment and portable hand tools, power tools, and some shaping and finishing stuff on the right. Behind me is our bandsaw. It's closest to where I teach our classroom, so I can jump in there when students are learning how to use the bandsaw. Today we'll be talking about an analog substitute for that while we're on distance learning, and we'll be working on the bench. So here at San Antonio High School, we're going to be taking and making veneer laminates. We borrowed a form that's very traditional for this high school and this project in general. Instead of using a sculpture in the round, we're going to be making laminates and creating a sculpture that is a bent lamination, and how it will be a sculpture in the round and have depth and movement is that we'll wrap it around a form. And this is a sup-fin shark. There's some black kelp in the background. And this is one of the teacher examples. First and foremost, we got to make a template. So we'll have this cardstock template already prepared. If you haven't made this cardstock template, go ahead and go back, and what you'll do is you'll find the video right before this and you'll make yourself a cardstock template. What that will mean is that we're actually going to start not from step 1, step 2, step 3, but actually step 4. So step 4 says number all of your veneer in the flitch. So what we're going to have is all of the pieces numbered. You're either going to have a 5, a 7, or a 9 piece flitch, and what you'll find is that the characteristic of the wood continues through the flitch. This style of veneer is being made available to us from Danzer Veneer out in LA, and we're going to go ahead and start on tracing the template after we've labeled our flitch. So what we're going to do is go ahead and grab the template. We're going to use the same template for each of these, and I'm going to use a colored pencil for no reason other than I'd like it to show up really well on the camera. Okay, so I see some grain lines up here. I could either have a very consistent, easy to understand, or I could have something that's a little bit wild. It's already started to move, it's not really flat, and so what I would suggest is that you start up top. If you would like your project to be considerably more navigatable? That's not a word. I would do exactly as the example is. So, in the top upper left-hand corner, or the bottom right-hand corner, or whichever it ends up being that you have the most straight grain, I would do and trace all of your pieces, ensuring that you follow it almost step by step. I'm going to go ahead and transfer this number 1 up here. So now I know that this is the number 1 laminate from our flitch. Next, we're going to go ahead and plan our relief cuts. So if we look right here, what we've got is we've traced our template only on the number 1. We're going to do one at a time. Oh, I should have put that up right side up. Perfect. Now it says number 1 right side up. I'm going to flip this over so it's a little bit more accessible for you. Each of these steps you want to take and photograph so that you can put them inside the process journal. You won't need to do that for every single piece of veneer, but you should do that for the first one so that you can keep track and I can support your progress inside of this. These are called relief cuts, and relief cuts cut across the grain. So this is that grain line. It goes this way. Okay? And our relief cuts are going to go across the grain. They can go in either direction across the grain, And in fact, like what you guys find on 5 Corners, is there's many ways to go across the street. So as long as you're crossing the wood grain and not going with the wood grain, you can create a relief cut. And so these relief cuts will get planned, they'll get photographed, put inside your process journal, and then go ahead and let it sit for a day. Or until I've already given feedback, especially when yours do not look like these. If yours are different, or if you have a question, go ahead and ask. And then you have the ability to cut your relief cuts. Stop cutting. If you don't mean to cut there, stop cutting. If it starts to go off the line, oh, that's okay. These lines, I put them down very quickly. But what's important is that I am not going with the grain. Now, another thing that you might notice is that I'm opening these scissors all the way wide because what I want is to have access to this muscle instead of these muscles. Okay, so I want you to kind of consider that there are these muscles and they have a lot of power. And these aren't necessarily always as plugged in, as tight to your central nervous system, and so you kind of like can get over ahead of yourself, and what'll end up happening is you'll go too far and it'll split out the wood. So now we're using these scissors instead of a knife. And the reason we're not using a knife is because, first off, I don't want it to get in front of your hands. Second, this is just going to follow the wood grain, and what you're going to find very quickly is that it's just going to make it chip. It's not going to make it cut. What we get with the scissors is that we have something supporting it underneath, and then the top edge, I guess you could talk about this either way, the top edge shears against the bottom. And so that's going to support the grain and prevent tearing. We don't want to tear, we don't want to split, and we want as much leverage and power so that we can go really slow when we make those cuts. Now, one thing that's really cool is that as long as you're going across the grain, it's a relief cut. So at least on this one, right on the edge, again, don't use the last part of the scissors, right at the edge in this last cut, we end up with a profile cut that is also a relief cut. Now don't forget, we wanted to label this one number 1. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set this aside. I might need it later. It's actually big enough to get another bird out of, or your own design. So I'm going to go ahead and set these aside, keep them safe. So now I have my entire bird cut out. No, I don't. I only have my relief cuts. So make sure that you've checked off everything. Make sure that you're photographing each step and then move on to the next step. It says now plan your profile cuts. So with a pencil and arrows, I'm going to go ahead and consider how I can make these profile cuts. So we would like to start and stop on the relief cuts. So I'm going to come in this way. What's going to happen is that the wood grain is going to fail along the grain right about here. I'm just telling you that's going to happen. We'll call that number 1. Because this is going to fail and pop out, we'll call this one number 2. Not only do I want to number it, but I also need to draw arrows so that I can keep myself in the loop and paying attention. This will still be across the grain. Let's call this number 3. This corner is going to be real tricky. So we might have to start further out, and we may have to leave some material. This is going to be a fine cut. There's not going to be any problems with this one. We'll call that one number 4. Number 5. And then we'll watch out. This one's actually going to be, I think I'm going to come this way. And this is why it's so important that we number them. This one is in fact number 6, but it's going the other way. We'll go up to the top. This will be removed right here. We can go ahead and make number 7. It's going to go that way. Number 8 will continue to go downhill. Now here we are again, where if I go this way, I might split out the tail, so I want to go downhill. And I can't just lift this up and start under. I need to start up here. So I'll come right here. That's going to be 9. Turn this corner. Let's call that 10. And then 11. So you'll take a photograph of this. You'll put it in your process journal. And then I'll go ahead and give you feedback. So we're going to start with number 1. Now, these relief cuts are supposed to protect us, I didn't mean for that to fail, but it did, protect us from splitting, so that as we turn and we cut close to the profile but not over the profile is our traced lines. What should happen is that instead of failing, it fails at the relief cut and it pops out. So this is exactly how it works on the bandsaw, but instead of us being worried about the wood failing, the relief cuts on the bandsaw protect the bandsaw blade, because in that equation, the bandsaw blade is what is thin. Woo! Real tight on that profile right there. Again, stay in the back of the scissors, because that's where you have the most power, and torque, because you can get the scissors to start, like you can rotate that lever and get really good pressure inside of it. So again, it started to crack, but it cracked where I was planning, and it stopped at the relief cut. Follow your arrows. So I'm going to get right there close to the profile. If you can't get perfectly on the profile, don't sweat it. If you're worried it's going to chip, don't sweat it. Okay, so I just cut off, well, I don't know what I cut off, but I know that of 9, 10, 11, 8, and 7, my lowest number is 7. So now I'm going to go ahead and cut number 7. Ooh, I lost a little chip. Okay, I got 7, I got 8, I gotta stop. Ooh, I didn't go all the way with that relief cut. Oops. Shh, don't tell anybody. Make sure your relief cuts stop before the line and that your profile cuts don't pass them up. So I'm gonna go around. Might get a little bit of chipping, but it'll be on the side that doesn't matter. I'm gonna go around. And what should happen is I should land in my relief cut and it wants to pop out. And then this is the last cut. Woo, we are almost going directly parallel with the line. So if you got to chicken out and leave a whole bunch of material there, that's absolutely fine. Now, we have finished cutting out the profile. And now what it says is repeat your success. Okay? So some of my successes is that I planned my cuts and they went really well. Correct your mistakes. Well, one of my mistakes is that I didn't go far enough on the relief cuts. I needed to go all the way just right before the profile line. One of my mistakes is I went too far with my relief cut. And so now when we go to laminate these, there's going to be a little bit of sanding at the end. It says cut the rest of your laminates. Now that you have number 1, and number 1 is correctly labeled, now that you've put photographs of all of these steps labeled inside your process journal, go ahead and move on to the rest of the flitch. This is not designed to be incredibly difficult on your own without supports, but if you do need supports, right, if you're not sure, go ahead and take photos if you need help. So it says no photos unless you need help on the step, okay? So if you end up on piece number 5 and it's not working, if you end up using Flitch piece number 1 to make a replacement for number 4 and you need help, please photograph it, ask me some questions, because what it might end up being is that your laminate comes out of this scrap piece differently than your original piece out of that Flitch, the way that you planned. The last thing you're going to do to prepare your veneer laminates is take a picture of your flitch, kind of like this. And what you'll find is that none of them are going to be exactly the same or perfect, but they're going to be very close, and you'll have left the line showing on all of them. Thank you so very much. I look forward to seeing your progress. Thank you, thank you. Bye, guys.